It's Gabriel.
It's Bailey.
And this is CYMK.
Okay, so who are we talking to? Who is this? Who are you?
I am Ariel Bowman. I am a sculptor, mostly a ceramic sculptor. I work largely in making prehistoric animals, reconstructions of extinct creatures. So I'm also a paleo artist, but I would say I consider myself a ceramic sculptor.
And she throws in some Rococo elements.
I do. A lot of my pieces combine 18th century Rococo decorative objects along with the picturesque aesthetic. And all of that is to talk about the contrast between the natural world and natural history and our kind of human history. So the fact that the world is millions of years old and so are all the animals on it, but we haven't been here very long. Mm-hmm. So I like putting those two things together to make people kind of question our place within natural history. The combination of those things too, seeing a prehistoric animal in a Rococo palace makes you question a lot of things about the animal and be very curious about them. So I like that sense of wonder and curiosity that's sort of like what a kid has in terms of being excited about nature.
Right. You use the terms wonder and curiosity, but I know you're not a fan of like whimsical or whimsy. Do you want to tell us why?
So it's not a bad word necessarily. It is a word that I get a lot because I like my pieces to be humorous or comical because I feel like I'm kind of a funny person. And one of the ways that I feel like I make my work my own is to put those animals in kind of humorous situations. And whimsy is not necessarily a terrible word. It's just not a word that I would use to describe my work. I would say that it's humorous or comical, but not necessarily whimsical. Whimsical, I feel like, is attached to some kind of fantasy or a fantasy creature, whereas my pieces are what I like to use James Gurney's term, imaginative realism. So it's very realistic and believable as a fantasy, but it's not necessarily whimsical, totally invented silliness.
Right. I've also been starting to use imaginative realism.
It's a good term.
Yeah, it's good.
You guys sound very intelligent.
James Gurney is the creator of Dinotopia. So if you ever remember those books, or they made a TV show a long time ago, but he used to illustrate for National Geographic. He's a big influence of mine. And he went from illustrating for National Geographic to creating his own entire world and book about a universe where we coexist peacefully with dinosaurs. And so all the people in Dinotopia are riding dinosaurs and talking to them and using them to operate machinery and stuff. And it's a really cool little imagined world. Definitely one of my bigger influences.
That's fun.
So do you ever make pieces with realists? Because you do more extinct animals or the mash between the two. Do you do ever any current animals or living animals?
I do on occasion, but mostly I use modern day animals to reconstruct the extinct ones. There's a technique that I use that goes back to the first paleo artists in the 1800s. When we first found fossils, there were artists trying to figure out what those animals might have looked like. And so those were the first paleo artists. And the technique that they use is called comparative anatomy. So comparative anatomy means you're looking at the skeleton of a ground sloth and you're looking at modern day animal skeletons trying to figure out what that animal might have looked like based on which modern day animal skeletons sort of have similar aspects.
Interesting.
So some of my first prehistoric animals were horse relatives, but they kind of had gorilla arms. So I was looking at modern day animals and then combining them to recreate the extinct creature. So there is reference to modern day animals there for sure. But in the end, I'm trying to accurately reconstruct an extinct animal. So there's never really any, they look like mashups of modern day animals, but they're still intended to be accurate reconstructions.
That's really cool.
Were you intending on ever being a paleontologist? I don't know if you already said that or not, but...
No, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a zoologist. That was my plan the whole time I was in grade school and high school. And then at the end of high school, I decided to apply to art school. Mostly because AP science classes were hard and not as interesting anymore. We started learning about animal cell biology and I just totally fell asleep. And I was more interested in studying animals in the field or doing things like that. But you have to do all this other science and math in college to do those things. So I decided that I would rather go to art school. I think my senior year of high school, I was taking 3 art classes and I had senior out. So it was pretty much just art classes towards the end. And that decision brought me to the Kansas City Art Institute for undergrad, which then brought me to ceramics because they have such a fantastic ceramics program there. I actually went there to major in animation.
Oh, so you're good with the computer and
yeah. Well, I didn't know it was all on computers. That was part of the reason I didn't major in it.
Were you thinking of like hand-drawn animation?
To do cell animation. Well, they didn't teach that anymore.
Like in
because
the
it was
Disney
all. It had
movies?
actually all just sort of transferred over to that. They weren't teaching any cell animation in the department anymore. They used to.
Like Don Bluth
Yeah.
videos?
I mean, Walt Disney went to KCAI for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
So there are a lot of good animators that have come through there, and it was a big reason I wanted to go there. But then when I found out it was all on computers and I'd been doing some ceramics and foundations, I sort of remembered that I really liked it. And the ceramics department there, they had students in there making these huge self-portrait heads that were like 4 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
Really ambitious, amazing pieces. And I was just like, I want to be with this crew. I want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also started researching Beth Kavanaugh's work, who's one of my biggest influences. She makes very large animal sculptures in clay. And one of the things that most people don't know about clay is that, yeah, you can make great big sculptures out of it. And most people think of it as making functional pottery, but ceramics is much broader than that. And when I realized that I could make animals out of clay, I realized that's what I want to do. It sort of combines my zoology interest with art, and all I did was make animals when I started working in clay. But the paleontology came later.
Okay.
The interest there anyway. But
Right.
it was always, there was always a part of me that loved science. So I think that's how it came in.
Yeah. I feel that because sometimes I'm thinking about like, oh, what animal can I put in this painting? Because I do a lot with animals. And then I'm like, I wish there was a different well I could dip into. And you dipped into a different well. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, but it's related. So I always remember as a kid, I loved sitting around looking at animal encyclopedias and learning about weird animals that live all over the world in different places. And they're really strange looking. And nobody knew about them. And I also really like to spout facts about them to people. I was a nerdy kid. But I realized that the prehistoric animals gave me that all over again. It was like I was a kid again. And I would flip through these prehistoric animal books and be like, that guy's really weird. That's awesome. I never knew that existed because I thought I knew about all the animals in the world, but I didn't know about all these prehistoric ones. So a lot of my work is about bringing those animals to people's minds and letting them experience them in a way that's different than a natural history museum. You can see their bones on display, but it's not the same as seeing them reconstructed.
Right.
So growing up, were you always surrounded around art, or was it you in elementary? Yeah.
Art and animals, pretty much my whole life. So my dad restores antique furniture for museums and collectors in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and all around Texas, and he's done things around the country as well. But I grew up with his shop in the backyard full of Rococo furniture, actually, because 18th century French furniture is his specialty. So I grew up around gilded Rococo things, just being out in the barn. And then my mom is a ceramic artist and sculptor and jeweler and general artist of all trades, but mostly a ceramic artist. And she taught ceramics at Tarrant County College for over 30 years when I was growing up. So I grew up in her ceramics lab and kind of hanging out there. And was surrounded by all of that. And they took me to every museum in Dallas as a kid every day, like it was normal. I went almost every weekend to the museums in Dallas and Fort Worth. And I realized later on that that's not what every kid gets.
That's cool, though.
That's
to
really
get to see
cool.
all the exhibits change out, to know everything about the art.
And even the permanent exhibits, I always talk about at the DMA, they have a Frederick Edwin Church painting, the icebergs. It was a big influence on me. It's huge landscape painting of icebergs. And it's so impactful. It makes you feel cold just to stand in front of it.
Really?
And that's where I fell in love with romantic landscape paintings. They're still a big influence on me. So just the fact that I went to see that painting almost every weekend. We were always going to the museums. The Kimball Museum in Fort Worth is definitely my favorite. We used to always go there and eat lunch, and it was just a regular thing for us, but it's not a regular thing for most kids. So
no, I'm so jealous.
I know.
To grow up and say that as a child you were influenced by romantic landscapes. Like, oh my
but
gosh.
you have to look back on it to see that. As a
right.
kid, I hated it.
But
I didn't want to go. Wanted to have my normal
you were
Saturday,
learning
but I realized later on that it was really impactful on me. And then we always went to the zoo. I always loved going to the zoo, and I had a lot of animals as a kid. Grew up on a couple of acres, and we all had horses, and I did trail riding, and we had ducks and chickens and dogs and cats and all kinds of stuff. So it was always, oh, can I keep it? And that was fine. Yeah. So it was really fun. And I think that's part of it, is that I just spent a lot of my time as a kid around art and around animals. And it all kind of makes sense when you look at my work and then think about growing up that way.
And it just like all is coming full circle now, like explaining from like, oh, your childhood to your work now. And then it's like, oh, wow, you can make a...
And seeing your parents, be successful full-time artists, maybe, like people who want to be artists don't get that straight influence. Right. And it's usually a pipe dream for a lot of people, and it still is. But yeah,
and their parents aren't necessarily supportive of that pipe dream, which mine were like, oh, you want to go to art school? That's great. Wow, we never expected that. Hooray.
That's awesome.
You should go to the best art school. It was like that. Yeah. But two, it didn't actually occur to me until I was applying to art schools, or even until I was in art school and started getting some professional practices training in being an artist, that I even thought about art in terms of a career. So even growing up around my parents, it didn't occur to me that both of them were artists and had careers within the arts. My dad being an entrepreneur and my mom being a teacher, they both found ways to make art for their whole lives and as part of their daily work. And I just never really put that together until later on when I was in college and actually deciding to make that my life. Then I was like, oh, well, mom and dad did it. But it wasn't something that occurred to me right away. I think when you're in high school, you just maybe don't notice a lot.
No, yeah.
Just going through the motions, trying to pass classes.
Yeah, just trying to get through.
Talking about the future.
Right.
And I bet they had a lot of good advice for starting an art career or a career in the arts.
Yeah, I mean, they did. And a lot of good experience. I remember my dad telling me a lot about commissions he took when he first got out of school, and he was hard up for money, and he would take a commission and then they just wouldn't pay for it because they didn't like it. And he would have spent all this time on it. And I learned real quick to make, I'm going to make an estimate and make people sign it and give them maybe a deposit. And, there's a lot of things you can learn from other people's mistakes that way. Yeah.
Artists take note. That's smart. That's very smart.
Get your money. Get your money's worth.
Get your money.
So looking back at your work now and then your earlier work, how would you say your work has evolved from like your undergrad or your high school work or anything like that?
My high school work was mostly paintings. I did a lot of watercolor. I loved watercolor. And I did some clay work. I did have ceramics in high school, which I was lucky for. A lot of people don't. But I just thought of it as the same as what I do at home. I didn't really realize that was special either. But I did do some clay work. But like I said, when I graduated, I wasn't planning on majoring in ceramics. So my portfolio that I applied to undergrad with was mostly paintings and drawings. But all sort of centered in that realism and that kind of imaginative realism. I liked doing representational things in realism. And so my undergrad work kind of evolved when I started majoring in ceramics based on the projects they were giving me. My senior BFA thesis show was called Praelium. It's Latin for struggle, and it was all prehistoric animals that were fighting against some kind of restraint. And for me at the time, the way I thought about it was, these animals were so huge and massive that nothing of ours could ever contain them. So that was the idea. Like, if we ever tried to and I think that's where putting them in human history context sort of started. Was I started out just making prehistoric animals, and then my professors were like, well, you can't just make prehistoric animals. What are they about? Put them in some kind of context. So that's the difference that I learned in school between concept and context. Concept is the idea. Context is how you get the idea across. So if the idea is about them struggling against some kind of human restraint, then that's what I did. So the gestures were really important in those. They needed to be straining or fighting, and any of the chains and ropes that bound them needed to be weakened somehow. So I was like sawing at the ropes so that it was just like one thread holding them or something, putting muzzles on them, but making it seem like they were about to snap through it.
That's really cool.
Using the human elements to accentuate the parts of the prehistoric animals that I liked the most. And that's how I determined, I'm choosing these based on their weird features. So there was one animal that I made that they only ever found the top of its skull. And it was 33 inches long, the top of its skull.
Oh, gosh.
So more like this, with big teeth. Some kind of predator that's actually more closely related to sheep and whales.
Sheep and whales? How are sheep? Yeah.
So it's really strange. There's like prehistoric whales that split off into land creatures that became predators. And then there's another branch that became sheep.
Wow.
So do you believe in evolution?
100%.
No.
So I love evolution. It's such a weird thing. And there are all these branches and dead ends and animals that didn't continue. And then there's all of these animals we have today that are actually weirdly related to unexpected things. So that was an animal I was interested in. And because the focus was on all these teeth and this really long jaw, I put a muzzle on it. So it was all about trying to accentuate those parts of the animal that were most interesting to me. And that's still how I choose what animals I make today when I'm doing research and I come across a prehistoric animal. I'm like, oh, that guy's weird looking. He's got 4 tusks and a bunch of horns and a strange face. He kind of looks like a hippo and a rhino put together. So I find the ones that I think the features are the most strange and interesting because I think that's the draw for people.
Yeah.
And after undergrad, I applied to a residency program and went to be an artist in residence at the Armory Art Center in West Palm Beach, Florida for 8 months. I made about 10 pieces while I was there, and my work really changed there because I wasn't in school anymore. I didn't have anyone giving me assignments. I was making my work all on my own, and I was in a new place, and I was influenced by all the other resident artists and the people I was working with. And that's when I made the Prehistoric Circus series, which sort of puts all of those prehistoric animals in a circus setting. And that series was important for me, I think, because it was when I started introducing that humor that was actually always a part of my personality, but never came through in my work.
Right. And that's what part I really love about your work is I love the humor. I love when we can insert some humor where people think art is such a serious subject sometimes. So
right. And I really struggled with it. I was like, I thought to be taken seriously, my art had to be serious. And that's definitely not the case. Humor is a great entry point for people. And most people who look at art are not looking at it seriously anyway. So it's better to get on everyone's level with humor or something that is relatable.
The enjoyment that I felt whenever I first saw your exhibit here at SAMFA, because I didn't met you then, and then you said you weren't even here yet. And so I was just touring it one day, and I was just like, oh my gosh, these are so delightful and amazing. And I didn't take it, I was younger, so obviously I didn't take it seriously, and I wasn't working here yet, and so I didn't really know the value of art, but I was just like, wow, these are awesome. And I was very impressed. And I took a bunch of photos and I sent them to my friend. And so now that I know you, it's so mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And it's always difficult when we have artists in the galleries that we can't talk to or ask about their influence and their process because we have to just guess what they're meaning by it. But I always appreciate knowing the exact meaning behind the works like you do. So
yeah,
cool.
It's been a lot of fun to share that over the years. So the pieces that I had here at SAMFA in the Invitational some of them were from my graduate thesis exhibition, which was called Wondrous Creatures. So I was in the SAMFA Ceramics Invitational in 2021 with Gregory T. Garden and Brooks Oliver. And that was, I think, the 3rd time I'd exhibited at SAMFA. I'd been in 2 other competitions. And gotten an award here or there, and I sold a piece to the museum. So I think there was an honorable mention in the second one, and the first one I sold my piece to the museum. They acquired it. So
which piece was that?
The white stag on the blue cushion. It's called the White Heart.
That's right. We do have one. Okay.
So that was the first piece I got in the collection in the first competition I ever got into. And I think I had applied to the ceramic competition a few years before I actually got in it. But after that, it was a really good show for me to apply to, so I kept doing it. The second year I was in it, I was still in graduate school, so I couldn't come for the exhibit or the ceramics weekend. And then
when did you graduate?
From graduate school, it was 2018.
Okay.
And then in 2021 was when they invited me to be in the Invitational. And that was really awesome opportunity. And I was able to come and demonstrate and do workshops and lectures about my work and also have an exhibit in the museum. And so that's where you saw those pieces was that year. And the Wondrous Creatures series that was on display was some of my graduate thesis work that was all about putting those prehistoric animals in the Rococo palaces.
How interesting how that happened. I just wanted to quickly say, so how did you hear about the SAMFA competition? Was it just your cafe account let you know, or?
I think originally it was that. And then my mom was like, oh yeah, I know SAMFA. I go every year to San Angelo for the ceramics weekend, and you should go. And so I think must have been I must have been here in 2018. I can't remember. I came for the one where Roger Allen had just passed away, and we came for Roger and Angela's memorial service that was during Ceramics Weekend. That was my first Ceramics Weekend. And then after that, I was invited to the Invitational, and I was part of Ceramics Weekend.
Yeah.
And then at that event, I heard that the museum was reacquiring the clay studio and that they might need someone to manage it. And so I reached out to Howard about a potential job, and that's how I got hired to work for the museum.
Wow, it's come full circle.
Yeah.
It's been a lovely time with you here. And now
Yeah.
you're leaving.
Amazing time.
Yes, I am leaving to be a full-time mom and studio artist again. Hopefully that will happen.
But
A new adventure.
now it's just so much more experiences for you to inspire your work. And I'm so excited to see how your work is going to change with like motherhood and just moving to not a different environment because like you're from home, but like back home and just to see what you're going to make is really cool.
Thanks. I'm excited too. I do think that the whole motherhood thing is going to impact my work in a way I didn't expect. I'm already looking at my childhood influences more. I think some more Disney might come into my work a little bit. And I already have a lot of Disney in my work in terms of my influences. But I do think rewatching some of those childhood movies and thinking about my childhood as I'm raising Milo is affecting my thoughts about my work. And if I'm trying to create childlike wonderment and fantasy, what better way than to watch my child discover the world?
Great.
Yeah. And he already loves the cat, and he's so into animals, and he loves his little books about animals. And I just love watching him go through all of that interest that I remember going through. So I can just tell already that he's going to be into the animals too.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned your workshops. What is a typical work day look like for you?
Like a work day in the studio, or if I'm doing a workshop like as a presenter teacher?
Let's do both. So let's do workshop first.
So I travel a lot to workshops. I've done several all over the country. I've gone to different universities to do workshops. Some of those are hands-on and some of them are demonstration. Been to Oklahoma University Ceramics Department. That was a demonstration workshop. And then Kansas, Fort Hays University, I did a hands-on workshop with their students, and they brought high school students and other college students from around the area to come to that one. So it was actually almost 30 people in there making animals along with me.
They were all making them with them.
So I've done some bigger workshops, and then some others that I have coming up is at Blackberry Hill Art Center in New Hampshire, and that's going to be June 26th to 30th of this year. I think I have another one booked, but I can't say for sure where it is now, but it's later this year. So before COVID happened, I was doing a lot of that, and then it sort of dropped off because no one was traveling for workshops anymore, but now it's starting to pick up again. So I've done them for colleges and art centers, and they usually involve, like I said, either it's a demonstration only or it's hands-on, and they work along with me, and I teach them my whole process in either 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, or 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So it depends on the place and how long they can invite me for. The one I'm doing in New Hampshire is 5 days. So it'll be hands-on. They'll go through my whole process. I'll teach them everything from start to finish, how to make an animal. And then I'm also going to show them a little bit of my glazing techniques and some of my texture tricks and those silicone texture mats that I use. I'm going to show them how to make those.
That's going to be so
How to
cool.
make them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the art center was able to order the materials to have for the workshop. So it all depends on the place I'm doing the workshop.
I'm just going to get my free workshop in right now.
I use silicone molds in my work as press molds a lot of time for clay, and I dust them with cornstarch so I can press the clay into them. A lot of the Rococo or Maloo pieces that I use are too undercut for plaster molds, which is what you'd traditionally use for sprig molds. So my sprig molds, is what they're called, are silicone, and I use 2 different kinds of silicone. I use a brushable silicone for some of them if they're bigger, or if it's a smaller object or just a texture, I use a silicone putty, which is a 2-part silicone that you take equal parts of and knead it together, and then you can pancake that out on any texture and capture it to put onto clay.
So where do you get your textures from? Like
All over nature, whatever I find that I want a texture of. Some of my textures are from like faux sheets of leather, like fake snakeskin and hide and stuff, is always a good resource. I wish a lot of times that I had access to like a zoo or nature center that would let me take real textures from animals that passed away or something.
Oh man, that'd be cool.
That would be a good resource. Taxidermy places are a good resource for that kind of stuff too, because they have a lot of shells and fragments and things. But yeah, I would say that I just collect textures from all over. But sometimes there are other textures that I use in my work, like fabrics. I'm always trying to make clay look like other things. So I have fabric textures and things that make it look like the clay is embroidered fabric with a pattern or something. So I have lots of stamps and rollers and things that I use too.
Speaking of, you did teach us the slip dip method.
I was about to
Do
say.
you want to go through that real quick?
Sure. So a lot of my work uses, like I said, trompe l'oeil techniques where I'm trying to fool the eye and make someone think that clay is not clay.
Mm-hmm. I didn't think it was clay. She got me. And I was like, oh, you put a little fabric piece? She's like, oh, that's clay. And I was like, oh, you're lying.
That's what makes it so amazing.
So I love that because that's the wonder part, right? So if you can blow someone away with that, they'll look at your work a little longer because they're interested in how did you do that? Why is that tricking me so much? How is that clay? And I love that with the slip dipping because it is so easy to do too. I take actual lace or ribbon and dip it in a clay casting slip, and then I burn the fabric out in the firing and the clay remains. So it just is a perfect clay shell of lace or ribbon or fabric. And sometimes they're very fragile though. So I have a lot of pieces that break in shipping when they have those. So I have to be real careful about how I put those on. But they're a lot of fun to do. It's a fun little trick.
So if I had like a sock and I dipped a sock, I never talked about this. I had a sock, I dipped it.
Sure.
And it would keep like all the fabric texture of a sock.
Mm-hmm.
Holy moly.
Do you dip it twice for that extra protection?
It depends. It depends on the fabric too. You really only want to burn out things that are cotton. I try really hard to find all cotton lace and nothing with polyester in it because that stuff burns out and is really fumey and bad for you to inhale. So ideally it's cotton and it depends on how thick you want the shell to be. If you make it too thick, you might not get as much texture, but if you make it too thin, it might pull away when the inner part burns out, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So some people who slip dip, and it's a very popular technique in ceramics. There's lots of people that do it. I'm not the only one at all. I actually shared a studio with a very well-known slip dip artist, Virginia McKinney, when I did my residency. And so that's where I got a lot of my slip dipping knowledge, was from sharing a studio with her. And she took nature from all over Florida, this weird looking plants and stuff that they have there. And it's all organic, so it burns out in the kiln. And she dipped all of that in slip and made...
slip dip a leaf?
Mm-hmm.
What about food? Can you slip dip food?
Yeah, but it burns out real gross.
Hamburger?
Oh, because it all
wouldn't.
So,
and it's not the same because like fabric, it goes into all the little, it absorbs the slip and the water, and other materials won't necessarily do that.
Yeah.
But I have seen students do like socks and underwear and
does
stuff like
it have to be a certain slip, or do you just mix your clay with water and make sure it's a nice consistency?
It would have to be casting slip, and casting slip is a little different because it has a deflocculant in it, which keeps it in suspension. So it makes it stickier in a way. So it's what you use for slip casting in plaster molds. And it dries differently than just clay and water would. Mm-hmm. You could do it with clay and water, it just wouldn't work as well.
Right.
Casting slip is thinner too, so it just barely coats it. But what you can do if you're trying to get a good shell on something is dip it once and let it dry and then dip it again.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Slip dipping, play with it. It's fun.
Yeah. Gosh.
I just have nothing so delicate that I would need to do that. I was just saying, like, I wish I took a class. Oh,
You scared me.
I wish I took a class with you over animals, but like, I'm not into animals, but like, you were so into animals, it would make me into animals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get that a lot, actually. And I did teach an animal sculpture class here, which I feel like made a lot of animal sculptors out of people who weren't before.
So back to your day-to-day teaching. So you were a teacher back in Dallas for how long?
3 years. On and off. I taught continuing education, and I was adjunct professor of ceramics and drawing and art appreciation at 3 different community colleges in the Dallas area: Collin College, Dallas College, and Tarrant County College.
You did all of them? Like all at the same time?
Yep.
Man.
My gosh.
Well, because each one of them is like a part-time job.
Yep.
So, you only teach about 3 hours a week for one class at one campus, and maybe sometimes they don't even have a class for you. So being adjunct professor is a really rough game. And most adjunct professors teach at several different colleges in order to just make a single living.
Oh, wow.
It's a very difficult thing. And it's what most of them have to do to get the teaching experience required to get a full-time position with benefits
Makes sense.
and a salary.
Doesn't make sense. That sucks. But like,
I mean,
yeah.
Some of the ones I work with had been an adjunct for 20 years
Oh my gosh.
and just never gotten that next leg up. It's a really rough game. And some colleges pay you more than others. Some of them have enough classes for you every semester. Some of them tell you, oh, we don't have any classes for you this semester. And then you just don't make any money for 3 months.
Yeah.
So you have to have another college to fall back on. I was really trying to teach ceramics more than anything else, but I needed money to pay bills. So I started teaching art appreciation at Collin College because that's what they had. So I had to learn to teach a lecture class.
So yeah, what is that? What is art appreciation?
It's basically a survey class. It's like a art history survey class for non-art majors, but they can take it for an art credit. And I used to tell all of them to just take my drawing class because it's more fun than sitting in the lecture hall.
Yeah.
But it is the most popular sort of art credit class in community colleges. It's the one that pays the bills. So you can always get an art appreciation class, but it's not as much fun to teach a lecture class versus a studio class. I love teaching my ceramics classes, my studio classes. I taught some really amazing continuing education students at Dallas College. And then right as I was leaving to come for this job, they were actually eliminating their continuing education program in a way that was really unfortunate. And so all of the ceramic artists who had been taking continuing education classes there for almost 20 years were going to not be allowed to take classes there anymore.
Oh, man.
Because they wanted to become one college and focus on credit.
Oh my goodness.
Golly.
And so a lot of those students were actually asking me, oh, are you thinking about starting a studio here, like a community studio? And I was like, oh, I'm going to start at one in San Angelo.
Yeah.
So this isn't the only place where a community studio would be a really good thing to have. There are a lot of adults who want to do recreational ceramics and have a place to do that. And most of the colleges are eliminating their opportunities for that by taking away their continuing education programs because they're not profitable.
Well, once Milo's older and out of the nest, maybe you can start up a studio where they need one or something.
Maybe we'll see. I might teach private workshops at my studio, which is something I did a lot with my mom when we shared a studio. We taught our animals and artifacts workshop together, and that was a lot of fun. We did that annually, and we had some regulars who always came for it.
Can you do that in Dallas at your house?
Yeah.
I'll come to that.
Right?
I'll do that.
Yeah.
So I think I will continue to travel and do workshops occasionally, but I will also maybe host some workshops at my personal studio, and people can pay and come out and work with me there.
Be awesome.
Yeah. I love teaching. I really do. And one of the things that I love most about workshops is that I get to just teach the thing that I do.
Right.
And other people get to learn the thing that I do that want to make animals or learn those techniques. And then it's just a short one-time thing. It's not everyday teaching. Everyday teaching is hard. And teaching credit classes is hard. And even just teaching community classes where you've got 15 people in a class doing all different techniques and making all different things, and you have to be versatile enough to help them all make those things.
And I feel like it's a lot of admin, and like that kind of takes away from the art aspect of it. And
it does.
Somebody else to do it.
Teaching is, especially in the college system, I would say is 90% admin and only 10% teaching.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of good people there who do it for many years and who have made a lot of change and impact by teaching people ceramics in those programs. And so they're doing the hard work, like my mom did for 30 years, taking community college students and giving them a passion for clay and turning them into ceramic artists and
That's great.
sending them on to big programs and things like that. So those are important fixtures, I think. For sure, it's an important place for people to connect with clay, and the community art centers are too. So I'm so glad that SAMFA has that now, to have a place for people to come and just learn how to do ceramics or rediscover it. Is really important.
That's thanks to you. So thank you, Ariel.
You're welcome. I had a lot of fun building it up, and I hope that it stays and draws more people to take classes.
I hope so too.
agree.
I think that we've got a big group and a large group and a very supportive group behind the studio that wants to keep it alive. And I think as long as that morale is there, it'll keep it chugging.
That's the great thing about clay. It's a community material. It's a community builder, and it tends to remain once you get enough people together to do ceramics. It tends to stay.
Yeah, the group has grown substantially. It's crazy just like watching from a couple, like 1 to 2 people in a class to like 15. And so
Yeah.
It's
And
really awesome.
I remember you just trying to do everything by yourself when you first started. And now to see this whole team come together and everybody has their own job and they're all doing their part. Is
Open studio monitor.
It's good. And that's important because Open Studio is one of the most popular things we have.
They get to do their thing. So.
And it provides a place for people in the community who are ceramic artists but don't have their own facilities to come and work.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to take a class. They just need a place to work and have clay community. And they have that with Open Studio.
I had a lady come into Open Studio. She bought $200 worth of clay. Is that okay? She bought like 8 boxes.
Really?
I know. I was like, I'm not going to say no to you buying clay from me.
Who was it?
Oh my God, her name. She's blonde. She came to Mark Epstein's workshop.
Was it Sherry?
Probably.
Yeah, Sherry was one of our students when we first opened, and then she went on her own after one class and made her own studio and bought a kiln and set up her house.
And now she
comes to us to buy clay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great service that we provide to the community now, is that we're a place where you can come and buy clay.
Hopefully,
but you have to be a museum member.
Soon. Later.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll see. Hopefully, it continues to grow.
For it to be a creative outlet right now is great.
I'm glad that it's like brought in the community.
Yes. I think if we have that production aspect, it will be in a separate area from the community area and the classes, and that it will be an opportunity for ceramic artists in the area to have employment that's related to ceramics.
Great.
So creating an industry for ceramics here is a good thing and would help some of those students taking our classes then turn around and maybe work for us producing ceramics. So.
Because that's already happening now, is like the students are like, oh, I'm going to the show, or oh, I'm selling at this like little pop-up. And I'm like, that's wonderful, because like I remember whenever you didn't know how to throw on a wheel, and so now to make these awesome pieces. Yeah. And again, that's more like functional wear, yes, but like I've seen some crazy sculptures come out of these students, and it's really awesome. And I'm glad that it's not all just functional pottery.
Yeah, I think it's important that the Clay Studio maintains the goal behind SAMFA's ceramics collection, which is to show the versatility of the material. It can do lots of different things. So our classes teach lots of different things, and students can make whatever they want, and we just help them do it. So I think it's important to maintain that, because that's the whole great thing about SAMFA's ceramics collection, is it is an insanely great survey of all the things that you can do with clay.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of cool trompe l'oeil pieces too, like you were talking about.
Some of my favorite artists are in there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
So tell me about your art plans going forward then.
I think mostly it will be workshops. I applied for some grants, but didn't get them, and that's okay. I'll apply again next year.
Yeah, next time.
And that's the main thing with applying for things.
What does applying for grants as an artist do? Like, what is that?
It's free money.
But like, okay.
So there's 2 different kinds of grants. There's restricted grants or project grants, which you apply to do a specific project that's going to cost you a lot of money to make. Materials, time, research.
Give that money to artists? That's awesome.
Lots of different people and organizations. There's a whole list of them online for the entire year of ones that you can apply to. Some of them are $500. Some of them are $60,000. It is all open opportunities. And the problem with all of these opportunities is that nobody seeks them out. And so sometimes they don't get very many applicants. And so if you're one of the people applying, you might be one of the only people applying.
Wow.
Because people don't think about all these opportunities. And it depends on the grant. But Abby applied for one recently, the Hopper Prize, which is a rolling grant for $1,000 to any artist, unrestricted funds, just to help you make your work.
So you just like give them a portfolio, or you just, what do you?
All of them have different requirements. So some of them might ask for a portfolio of 10 or 20 images. They have an Instagram, Hopper Prize.
Man, if Ariel was hanging around, we would do a whole series of how to help young artists get up off the ground.
Professional practices. Yes. It's not something they teach in school, which is disappointing.
I know.
Not every school. Anyway.
Everything I learned is from you. And I'll text you at 7 p.m. and be like, what is this tax question? And like,
oh yeah, you guys did taxes for your art.
So helpful.
Yeah. So there's lots of stuff like that I feel like doesn't get taught enough. And I worked with a lot of different art organizations back in Dallas, and I might become members of those again and start being active in them. But some of them like asked me to do a presentation to their members on like how to use Instagram as an artist.
Yeah.
Many of them were older and hadn't used social media and didn't realize the value of it.
Marketing and
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I've done a few different kinds of presentations like that. I have a presentation that I give to colleges when I do workshops. I send them a list of different presentations that I have, and one of them is a presentation about how to apply for grants and how I got the fellowships and grants that I got as a student, and how I found out about them. And yeah, some of them are through NCECA. So the National Council for the Education of Ceramic Arts is a great organization that gives out lots of grants and fellowships to ceramic artists in particular. The grant I just applied for that I didn't get was Virginia Group Foundation, which is a really big grant for ceramic sculptors specifically. So there's really tailored grants too that you can apply for that are just right for you. Like I said, some of them are project grants or travel grants or unrestricted grants, which are great because they just give you money to make your work. But say you got a solo show in another state and you don't have any money to ship the work and you don't have any money for the materials. That's what you apply for a grant for.
Oh, okay. So cool.
yeah, that's awesome.
Hey, you never know about they don't teach you this.
Mm-mm.
But
Yeah.
Ariel does.
Ariel does.
The starving artist thing is a myth. The only starving artists are the ones not applying for things.
Or
Because there's
they don't
lots
know.
of things
Yeah.
to apply for.
Yeah.
Shows, everything, and all of those things give you money. And even the things that you wouldn't think, like your local arts organizations or art alliances or coalitions, they have membership shows. And one of the first solo shows I ever got was from being a member of the Texas Artist Coalition. And they had a membership show where the award was a solo show in the gallery the next spring.
Oh.
And I won it.
Oh my goodness.
And then I had my first solo show at the
Cool.
Fort Worth Community Arts Center because of that. So, and that was for paying a $30 membership to be part of my local arts group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, that's an awesome opportunity that I got from doing something very minimal.
Right.
I thought that show was very, just, what's the word? I guess, like, special? No, not there. Shows are no big deal. No, but just very secluded, very picky, choosy.
Juried shows are.
Yes.
Other shows are just people paying for gallery space. I remember that was something that I didn't even know was an option.
You may have to repeat that last part.
Yeah, some of them are just paying for gallery space. I didn't even know that was an option when I got out of undergrad. So the show that I got that was a solo show, the Fort Worth Community Arts Center also just rents out gallery spaces to artists.
But I also didn't know
So you can just-
could apply to shows. I just thought
That too.
they asked you. And so it wasn't until you got here that you were like putting things in our folders and like applying to these shows. And I really found a sense of community of like, oh, they all want to help me out.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to help everyone
That's
out.
great.
Well, they do. And most of those organizations or galleries that are putting out a juried show call, they make money off of every entry.
Mhm.
So they use that
Oh
to
my
fund
gosh.
their programs.
The Blue made like 7,000.
Really?
I did the math.
Did you get in?
I did.
Hooray!
pieces
Because
got
you
it.
applied.
I did get that.
And Bailey got in too?
Yes, I went with Bailey, and then I thought I was going to get in because then I whenever Bailey was there, and they saw her grand pieces.
Oh my
Did you see them?
No, I haven't seen them yet. I'm
Stop it.
excited.
Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. Oh, go at like 6:30. We're gonna go. Everyone's gonna go 6:30.
Everybody's going to
That's when the cool kids going.
Okay.
Okay, so anyways,
I'm
so
excited.
Yeah, they like go and then she pulls out her stuff. And they're like, oh my god! And they pull out my little vase and they're like, that is super cute. I was like, oh,
No, they were
but the vase, they
probably.
accept it. No,
loved
it is cute. It's a cute little vase. So I think I just take things a little bit too harsh because that's what I think. That's how I was like ingrained to think of art. And now that
I do that same exact thing when I go to the actual show and I see all the pieces I think are better than mine. So you never stop doing that, unfortunately.
There's also
Credit.
still, to this day, even though contemporary ceramics has made leaps and bounds in the field of art as a respected material, there are still people who respect painting as a material, but then only see functional ceramics as something cute.
Mhm.
And that's a
Or-
real shame.
Or like plates or something to eat off of.
Because it's just as much fine art as anything else.
Exactly.
And there's been a long history, especially in Western art history, of dividing fine art and craft. And anything that is a craft medium, ceramics, fiber, wood, jewelry, all gets sort of put to the side like it's not fine art.
right.
And there's less of that now than there used to be. But I still feel like people who've grown up in the West in general don't have that. Whereas in Japan and the East, ceramics is very well respected as a fine art medium. So it just depends on where you are, and you'll find that too when you start entering shows more and more, that if it's a combined medium show, I find that very strange sometimes when they give out first, second, third in a show where there's sculpture and paintings and ceramics and all different materials. You can't really compare all of that stuff. It's apples and oranges. So I prefer shows where they give out medium specific awards.
Yes.
2D, 3D,
right.
that kind of thing. I also tend to apply to more shows that are all ceramics because I don't always find that my work either doesn't always get into those broad, every medium is welcome shows, or it doesn't really get the time of day from jurors or awards or things like that sometimes because it's made of clay. And even ceramic sculptors get flack for that because, the only respected sculpture materials are stone and bronze. Clay isn't a sculpture material. I've had people tell me that too.
Gosh.
Well, I made a sculpture with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of weird hangups people have about that. And all of it is weird stuff from the very first academy in Paris deciding what was art and what was not. But the great thing is now anything can be art, and that's awesome. So don't worry about your cute little picture. It'll do just fine in a big ceramic show.
That's what I was saying for that patterns one. That's specifically the ceramic patterns because it's like appreciated.
It's a great show, and you can keep up with those ceramics magazines. They come here to the museum and the office.
And there's shows in them?
Yep. Show calls in the back. Exhibition calls.
Yeah, gosh.
Calls for entry.
Okay.
And you can also just search ceramics on cafe and a bunch will pop up.
See, you guys said cafe. I was like, what's this little artist secret talk they're talking about?
Yeah, this is the secret cafe that the artist
Well, because like your mom told you about the cafe, and you're like, yeah. And I was like, okay.
Callforentry.org. And that is, in fact, also the website that the museum uses for the competition. So anybody wanting to apply to the ceramics competition next year, they'll apply through callforentry.org.
Oh my goodness.
There's also one called artcall.org.
That one's annoying to use.
It is a little bit, but I love you, Art Call. Sponsors.
Are they sponsors?
No.
Oh, okay.
I wish we had a sponsor. Sponsors? Hey.
Y'all should
Anyone.
get sponsors.
Eventbrite, Isika, Cafe.
Raw. We
Oh.
mentioned Bloom.
Yeah, because we got in. We're all Bloom entries, so
That's good.
this is gonna come out way after Bloom.
Yeah.
And so it's not gonna matter, but we matter.
We matter.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Anything else you'd like to share about your work? We covered a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like
did.
we did just like...
I can add on briefly to Bailey's question for my future plans.
Oh, okay.
So one of the other things that I'm hoping to do after I sort of get back into my studio work a little bit more is arrange some shows, some traveling exhibitions for natural history museums. I had a really great exhibit of Wondrous Creatures, that series that I made for grad school at the Florida Natural History Museum. And it was really neat to see my work in that environment and have people view it in that environment. Because I actually had little kids run in and go, that's a Brontotherium.
Wow.
Because they know what the prehistoric animals are because they love the Natural History Museum.
Right.
And so a lot of the visitors there are more engaged with the science than the art. But the art allows them to see the science in a new way. So my work sort of can cross both venues of art gallery or natural history museum show. And there's a lot of natural history museums all around the country that have separate gallery spaces where they show science related art. So I'm hoping to apply to some of those natural history museums with show proposals and take some of my work around the country to those natural history museums. Because I have a lot of it in storage and it needs to go somewhere and be seen by people. So that's the plan, is to start investigating some of those venues that I've always thought would be good for my work, but I haven't had much chance to reach out to those places and set those up.
Yeah. I'm so excited for your future. For your future.
I'm excited too.
We're going to miss you.
I'm going to miss y'all too. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Okay, I don't talk about it.
Glad to have you on.
Yes. I know. It was funny because whenever we first started, we were like, okay, Ariel's going to be our first guest. And then now you're like...
Well, y'all had some other awesome people come through that you couldn't miss.
No, that is very
You've
true.
had some really good people
And
in
we
here.
sort of just hit the ground running with like lining up the next episode. So yeah.
It's great.
We had a good lineup these past few weeks.
Well,
And I'm glad that you could join.
I'm so glad too. Thanks for having me.
If you want to see Ariel Bowman's work, Where can we find some pictures of that?
ArielBowman.com is my website. And then also Ariel.Bowman is my Instagram. I'm also rebuilding my Patreon account now. I've had some very loyal patrons that have stuck with me through a lot of not art making.
Maybe they forgot they subscribed. They're like, what is this $2 thing?
What is Patreon? Patreon is an amazing website where you can create a profile and invite people to become patrons. So they pay a monthly subscription to support your work. So instead of having one royal king support your work like a patron used to be back in the day for one artist, you would be like the king's painter, right? And that he's your patron and you'd do all this work for him and he'd pay you. And that's how you made your living. That's how artists used to make a living a long time ago. They would have patrons, wealthy people who paid them to make their work. Well,
sugar daddy, if you will.
Right. Well, Patreon is a way for the public to collectively be that support. So my Patreon page has, I want to say 10 or 11 patrons, maybe more.
It's not like, do they get anything in it?
They do. They get, nice? They are very nice. And they are also usually really interested or excited about the work that you're making. And they want to support your research and allow you to make that work. You can set goals on there for, when I reach this level, I'll be able to pay all the bills at my studio. When I reach this level, I'll be able to ship my work to this many shows a month. Exactly.
Do they get like
it's for independent creatives.
They get kind of like behind the scenes content. You can show them what you're working on.
Every Patreon page is different depending on who you subscribe to, what the rewards are. I offer mine access to my exclusive studio blog. So all of my creative thoughts, ramblings, research, pieces in process, they get to see all of that before anyone else. And sometimes a lot more. I do. I've tried to. I haven't been as good about it as I was before.
Busy guys.
Being having a full-time job and becoming a mom and all of that slowed me down there for a little bit. But I've started to pick it up a little bit. And it used to just be kind of like my blog where I would put my research when I'm thinking about pieces, or if I go to a natural history museum, I post pictures from where I went to do research and
I really like the
sketches. It's an amazing museum.
That one's huge.
They also have a very nice gallery space. Going to be proposing an exhibition of them.
Because they used to have the gym. That's where, it's like right there, right, that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a good space.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, to see your stuff, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'll propose it to them. I don't know.
You'll like send us all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to become a Patreon member, you get access to my creative studio blog, which is exclusive. I only post things on there for Patreon members. You get access to my Technical Tuesday videos. So I do Technical Tuesday posts on my Instagram, but the full how-to videos are for patrons.
And you do that in the studio?
I used to.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm picking it all back up again, hopefully.
I did so many things.
Yeah, when I was adjuncting, it was part-time. So I spent most of my time in my studio and running my Patreon. Mm-hmm. And at one point, it was a pretty good amount of money that I got from Patreon, and it covered most of my shipping to galleries and all of my materials. And I would do big thank you posts for them and show them me with all my palettes or send them, so I post all kinds of regular things on there. I also give them exclusive access to live stream workshops and live stream sit-ins on the studio. So when I'm working on a piece, you can join the live stream because you're a patron.
I'm gonna be like your groupie. I hope you know. Like when you're gone,
do it.
Your groupie,
How much to be in your Patreon, the levels?
The lowest membership level is Dodo, and that's $2 a month.
$2 a month.
Wait, so you give. Now this is just getting into Patreon. We don't even have to.
Well, I can still tell you all about it, but there are different levels. $2 a month is the lowest I have right now. $100 a month is the highest. They've stopped doing physical rewards on Patreon, but I also used to give out, like, if you were a patron for 6 months, you got a coffee table book of my work. If you were a patron and the patrons are what's paying for me to make those rewards. Yeah. They also all get exclusive access to a special shop on my website that they can only get into because they're a patron, and there's exclusive items in there that only patrons can buy.
That's
and
cool.
There's some things that only patrons would get. They're members. They're supporters. So you've got followers on Instagram, and Patreon's how you turn those followers into supporters. financial backers, people who want you to succeed and like getting a behind the scenes look, and they support your work monthly for that.
A ton of podcasts have Patreons.
Y'all could do one for
So
CYMK.
will we see you at NCCA next year?
I hope so. If I'm not pregnant or something.
She's already planned for number 2.
No, it's not an announcement. I just know that that it's definitely in our future probably to have another child, and I don't know when we're going to do that. So
Well, that's great.
We'll see. I might put it off a while. I'm pretty tired.
2 under 2
to get some work done. That's scary and hard. I think I'm going to wait a little bit. I also found out that pregnancy hormones don't leave your body until 18 months after you have the baby.
Good grief.
So that's why I'm such a fun emotional roller coaster.
You were very fun at NCCA. It was a whole different side of Ariel that I haven't seen before.
Oh yeah, well, NCCA's a party. That's the point.
Okay,
She was partying,
back to
baby.
your college years, you just reverted back. He was like, yeah.
Right. Only I was old and I had to be like, it's too loud in here. I'm leaving.
I'll teach you how to dance next time. Next NCCA.
Thanks.
I'll show
That's
you how to
good.
dance.
So yeah, NCCA is a great way to reunite with everybody. So I would love to see you there next year.
Can I come
Hopefully
to the
we'll
next
get to go. You should. Alex is planning on going.
Oh,
Alex?
yeah. And
We're all
we'll
going.
interview everyone.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, and I did apply for the Clay Studio to do presentations at next year's NCCA. And if we get that application, then I will probably be the one doing the presentation. But NCCA pays
You
presenters,
don't even
so
want to like be part of us, but like you're gonna be
right. I'm going to tell the story of how the studio got started, which is
That's
really
a
the only.
beautiful story.
I'm the only person who can tell that story. So I thought
That's
that would be the
great.
right thing to do to apply for.
You know what you can do? Play this podcast episode. Just put it up on the
Here
screen.
you go. Well, the whole point of applying to do a presentation at NCCA is to give a higher profile of recognition to the Clay Studio and the museum, the ceramics collection, and the competition. So those are the parts that Alex will talk about. Alex will talk about the history of the ceramics collection and show some works from the collection in the talk. And then this is if we get it. And he'll also talk about the ceramics weekend events and sort of what we've created here in terms of a ceramics community. So hopefully we'll get to share that story at NCCA. I think it will be good. Next year's theme is coalescence, which is about bringing people and things together.
Oh,
Cool.
Awesome.
So-
That's like
Yeah.
perfect.
That is perfect.
It really is. I think it's perfect. We'll see if they
When
pick
did we
it.
get the announcement or if we got it or not?
I don't know. I also applied to do a demonstration at NCCA next year, like
So I'll see you there.
my friend Katie Bosley did this past year. Did you go and
I
watch
did.
that? So they have these makerspace demonstrations where different artists can apply to do a demonstration for an hour at the conference, and a bunch of people can come and watch. So it's not the main NCCA demonstrators. They choose those, and those are like James Watkins did it this past year. But this makerspace one you can just apply for now. And they didn't used to have that when I first started going to NCCA. It's a relatively new thing.
That was a huge space though. Like you,
Mhm.
they put her
You're on stage with a microphone. You've got a bunch of people watching you.
Oh
And
boy.
then they ask questions while you're doing your art. It was super cool.
It's neat. So I applied for that to show everyone how I make my clay cushions
I love it.
Okay.
and
wait, so-
fabrics and stuff
So how do you do that?
with polyfill. So I demoed it in my class. Were you there that day? Right at the end of this class, in my studio right now, I have a woolly rhino who's resting on this cushion. And the only other piece I made in the last year or so was a Tasmanian tiger that's resting on a pillow, clay pillow cushion. And I make those by putting polyfill underneath a soft slab. And then I rest my leather hard animal on top of that, and it squishes into the clay slab, but it doesn't collapse because the polyfill holds it up. So you can puff up the slab all around the animal and make it look like it's really nesting into the cushion. And then you let the clay stiffen, and you can flip it over and remove the polyfill before you fire it,
How
because otherwise it would be like really leather hard. Maybe almost changing to bone dry, because I took mine out a little soon on the rhino and it sort of sank. So now there's a little bit of a gap underneath him, but it'll be all right. I'm still playing with this technique and I'm still refining it. So I'm still running into issues. But you can use polyfill to make, a clay cushion that way. And then you can have something rest into it. I had a friend in undergrad, Mariana Baquero, who's a really good artist. And she taught me how to make polyfill pillows. Where she took 2 slabs and used the polyfill to hold them together. And she burned it out because it wasn't very much. They were small. But she used them as a coaster, like a saucer for a cup. So her cups rested in these little clay pillows.
So did she put the
That's
on
cute.
top of the
It's
pillow?
really neat.
Well, it was.
So you put the polyfill in, and then you can rest the cup on it, and it will take the shape. It's like newspaper, only softer.
Okay.
So, you can use newspaper to make clay stay
Right.
puffy, but the polyfill is softer, and it gives you more of that cushiony look.
That's nice. We could learn forever from you.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Gabriel has a lot of questions for me. But I do have to run home because I promised my husband I would be home in time to take Milo, so he has a
Oh
meeting.
my gosh. Yeah.
It was so nice talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thanks
Bye,
for having me.
Ariel.
Bye.
Oh my God.